Our first author is C.L. Clarke. C.L. Clarke is the author of The Unbroken, the first in the Magic of the Lost trilogy. She graduated from Indiana University's Creative Writing MFA and was a 2012 Lambda Literary Fellow. She's been a personal trainer, an English teacher, and an editor, and is some combination thereof as she travels the world. When she's not writing or working, she's learning languages, doing P90-something, or reading about war and post-colonial history. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Faya, Podcastle, Uncanny, and Beneath Ceaseless Skies. Now, the book Unbroken broke me. It was it was a soldier war queer love story-ish political military fiction kind of fantasy thing that I didn't know I actually needed. Let me tell you what the official blurb is. Terrain is a soldier. Stolen as a child and raised to kill and die for the Empire, her only loyalty is to her fellow conscripts. But now her company has been sent back to her homeland to stop a rebellion, and the ties of blood may be stronger than she thought. Luca needs a turncoat, someone desperate enough to tiptoe the bayonet's edge between treason and orders, someone who can sway the rebels toward peace while Luca focuses on what really matters, getting her uncle off her throne. Through assassinations and massacres, in bedrooms and war rooms, Terrain and Luca will haggle over the price of a nation, but some things aren't for sale. As you will soon see, my conversation with Sheree was really fun. There were a number of moments where I thought, you know what, I could take this little piece of the conversation and just spend a whole bunch of time reflecting, reading more, and writing. In particular, I'm really interested in what caused Sheree to really focus on queer desire for home, for love, for family, and for community. I hope that you enjoy this amazing conversation with Sheree, and I'll see you in the reflections afterwards. So first of all, thank you very much for being a part of the author interviews for this year on ONYX Pages. I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate The Unbroken, which you wrote. This is your debut. And I wanted to just start a little bit. I want to get into talking about the book because I have lots of feels and lots of questions, which now that you're a captive audience, I will make sure I will get all my needs met by asking you everything about the book. But I'm really interested in how you got here. So how did you start to write? How did you even give yourself permission to write a novel, and in particular this novel?
Well, I always knew I was going to write a novel. That was set from a very, very young age. But this one in particular, I don't know if it was so much permission, because I guess the novel came in several different iterations, and I don't think it got quite as dark, and I don't think it went where it goes until I studied a bit more, got older, got a lot more disenchanted with everything. But it started when I was in school. I studied French literature and post-colonial literary theory, and also violent women. That was one of my kind of pet interest areas in literary research. And
violent women?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're going to get back to that concept in a second.
Specifically violent women in literature.
Yeah.
And my subset being obviously fantasy and science fiction, I guess, but fantasy is my home genre, I think. And so violent women in fantasy, French literature, specifically the course that made me like actually think about this was my course in Francophone African literature. And I had an amazing professor, and then my post-colonial literary theory kind of all just like they hit at the same time, and I was like, oh, I want to write this story. And so it changed a lot, like the relationships changed, characters changed, but that was kind of, I think it wasn't so much permission, but the desire to be more and more honest. And so I think each draft got a bit darker because it got a bit truer, at least truer to me. Yeah.
So violent women, because I'm interested in this idea that the story got darker. So I want to know what you mean by that, because obviously having read the novel, I got the end product, right? So I'm really curious about that transition over time. But I am really intrigued by this idea of violent women, and as a Black queer woman myself, I certainly, I think I was obviously socialized to not be violent, and I was socialized to believe that like violence is usually uncalled for and certainly unwomanly like. The women in The Unbroken are violent in a lot of different ways, which I loved. I loved the dimension of the violence that we saw, and the rationale for it, and the complicated nature of it. But tell me more about your understanding of like women and violence, and what you wanted to bring to the page in light of the thinking that you were doing before you started writing.
So at the very beginning, I was just like, why don't the women get swords in all these stories? Like, I want a sword. Why can't they have a sword? And so I just decided, fine, I'm going to write the book with the sword. Like, the girl gets the sword, the end. But the thing that I was really interested in as a reader, as a student, was that they only got weapons to defend themselves or to defend children, essentially. And if they did it outside of that, they were an aberration or they were a villain. As opposed to like the everyday hero man who gets to have a sword no matter what. Like, it's like his moment of manliness is when he gets his own sword, or he becomes the one true penis haver, essentially. And it's so that's what I was studying, and that's kind of what I wanted to push back against when I was writing The Unbroken. And I mean, really, in all honesty, all of my fiction, it will all probably be something like that. But also, I'm just like, women, and especially like Black queer women, any person of color, woman of color, really, like, we got a lot to be angry about. And and I don't, like, we're taught so often to like push it in, stuff it down. I mean, even white women have been taught the same thing. And so this like racist aggression often comes out differently in white women than it does from white men. Because everyone who is AFAB, at the very least, has been taught that you should be some sort of like not angry, or peacemaker, or like nonviolent peacemaker, mediator. If somebody, especially a man, is doing something to you that you don't like, your job is to placate and sort of like somehow get out of his way. And so I'm really just like, no, like, sometimes the answer is to get big and to get in their face. And so I wanted characters who acted like that.
Oh, and I feel like in this particular historical moment, I've come face to face, and I've had to come to terms with the fact that there are people on this planet who think I should be dead, and people that are like me should be dead. And so there's a lot of stuff around that. And I think this, although I've always been aware of anti-Black racism and white supremacy and the way that intersects with homophobia and transphobia, I've always been aware of that. And I've always been aware that there are people who, think that I don't deserve to live the life that I live, or that people I love deserve to live the life that we live, the way that we want to live our lives. But something happened this past year, where it just, for some reason, it just landed differently, that I just really, really got to see that there are people who don't want us to have lives, right? Don't want us to be here. And I think I'm still kind of coming to face to face with what that means in the midst of respectability politics that calls us to be above it all, and you know, and the fatigue and exhaustion of this particular moment. Like, and in fact, I'll say that reading The Unbroken right now was refreshing for me. The anger, the rage, the betrayal, the and also the eros of it all, which I want to talk to you about, you know, was also something that I needed to read right now. So it's hard to kind of sit with these hard realities about what we think in this moment, right?
For sure. I mean, like, there's also something that I wanted to explore, which is part of that, is that, you know, when you do stand up for yourself, sometimes violently, like when you punch somebody in the face after they've been like, you know, really, like, I'm not saying I've done this, but just imagine like a punching bag. Like, we go to boxing class because it feels good to hit stuff, right? Why does it feel good? Because sometimes things need to be hit. Sometimes those things are people. And I mean, and like there's something satisfying about defending yourself as well. Like, how often do we get in some sort of confrontation, not stand up for ourselves, and then we go away and we just feel like shit about it. And like there's shame, and so like, I'm not saying every confrontation needs to be violent, like but I don't think that violence is, especially violence on the part of women, is to be like castigated the way it is. So and
we'll explore the different contours of The Unbroken in a second. But just on that point, I certainly don't hear you saying we should be punching people in the face. But I think what I do hear is that, like, I think we limit ourselves in terms of what we can say and do to defend ourselves. And so for me, I know that I have a particular view. Like, if I'm walking down the street and somebody calls me the N-word, which has happened, or if I'm walking down the street and somebody pushes me, which has also happened, or if a security guard asks me, right, which happened last week, a security guard was like, "Where are you going?" Right, just walked up to me and said, "Where are you going?" And thankfully, because I've done the work that I've done, I was able to stop in that moment and decide whether I was going to answer the question or not. And my answer is, "Why are you asking me?" Right? Which in other circumstances, other times, might have been enough for me to be jailed, right? But I had the wherewithal to do that. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have just answered the question and my heart would have raced, right? And this time I was calm, and I was like, you have to justify your question to me, right? You don't get to just ask me why I'm where I am. Who are you, right? And so I think part of it is just like, but what if the response to that was to grab my arm, right? Or to call others to surround me, right? And that's not my lived experience. That's not likely to have happened. But what if it happened, right?
Because it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility.
It's not out of the realm of possibility. Absolutely. And we're seeing that more now than ever before, right? And so how would my physical body react? And one of the things that I loved about Terrain is that, like, her instincts, like her soldier instincts were just like, if you touch me, like, her instinct is to fight back physically. That's a first instinct. She actually has to pull herself back. In my world, it's the opposite. My first instinct is to freeze. And so I found that reading this book with all of these women with different instincts and impulses to defend themselves or to defend their people, you know, that they weren't timid in admitting that they had those influences, right? And they're all flawed in so many ways. So I really appreciate that, because until you Sheree, until you said violent women, I didn't actually realize that that was what I found so beautiful about the story, is that like we got texture to that, right? Because we don't get to see violent women a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or in a complex way. So we've gotten sort of into talking about the story, but I was wondering if you could what's this, what is The Unbroken? What's the story about? There's obviously the blurb in the back that I can read, which I'm not going to because everybody can read that. And there's also the story that I think, but as a reader, I'm picking out the story that I want, right? From the story that you intended. And I don't expect that those are going to be the same story. So what is the story that you're telling in The Unbroken? How would you describe it for people who haven't had the pleasure as yet?
Well, so I kind of like the way that you said that, and it makes me say that my story is all of the stories that everyone's picking up. So for some people, the story is this fraught relationship between Terrain, the conscripted soldier, and Luca, this imperial princess who has a ill-advised crush on her, and the turbulence and that power dynamic. So for some people, that's the story. For some people, it's the story of this, like, not prodigal, but like this kidnapped soldier who finally is like trying to decide between found family and blood family or country family, and mentors. For some people, it's a coming of age story. For some people, it's really about the two nations. Like, it's about the end of a colony, like it's about a revolution. And for some people, it's, well, I can't say that. I'll stop there on that one, because we've got to keep a little mystery for the spoiler stuff. But there's reunion stories. For some, it's also a story about finding religion, in a sense. It's not like necessarily like a metaphor for literal religion, but for finding some sort of cultural touchstone that you've been separated from. So it's all of those things, I would say.
So for me, it's this. I think it's what you were starting to say and didn't finish saying, which would be a spoiler. So I know. But for me, so I'll say that I'm reading The Unbroken at a time in my life where I'm working on my family tree, and so being first generation Canadian, my parents were born in Trinidad. My ancestry goes back to Africa, like many of ours do. And what I really identified with was this feeling of being placed somewhere that causes a betrayal by no choice of my own, right? So being raised in a world that sees my people as danger, as wrong, and not fitting in quite right there, and not fitting in quite right here, but sort of navigating that middle space, and then having to choose and re-choose loyalties, and then growing up while all that is happening, because Terrain is young, and so is Luca, right? Like, would they not be in their early 20s or?
It kind of, I'm sure it's changed as I wrote, because I got older too, but like Terrain is in her mid 20s and Luca's in her late 20s. So.
Okay. Yeah. So and for me, that's young.
That's young. That's young to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, so that they're young, like they're still identity forming and they're still trying to figure it out. So, yeah, I appreciated that. Okay. So I want to talk about desire. Because there's a lot of it in the book. There's a lot of desire. There's a lot of restraint, and desire for lots of things, right? Desire for peace, desire for freedom, desire for home, for safety, and then there's like lust, desire, sex, sensuality, and so on. And I want to talk about just the concept of desire and what you wanted to bring to the surface, because I feel like it was a light touch, right? Like I feel like you played in the tension of it all, which is my favorite part of desire, right? Is that the early tension, which I feel sort of gets stretched for most of the, if not all of the story. So why is it important for us to read a story with so much desire when the story is ultimately about like war and rebellion, right? So what's the role of love and desire in that context?
I mean, I think maybe arguably that the desire is it's what spurs people to war in the first place. I mean, at least one of the major factors, because we have, desire, greed, it's like a permutation of desire for safety, security. So like expanding or securing your borders. And part of it is also like the idea, like this desire for legacy, for like a vaunted ego. Like if I have the biggest empire, I will go down in history as the greatest emperor or whatever. But back on the personal level, I mean, I think one of the things I really wanted to do is just, I think it's one of the core things of like people. And so I wanted to keep a focus on like this war is being waged by people.
Yeah.
The people who are fighting in it are people. The people who are dying in it are people, and they want things. And sometimes the tragedy is like innocent wants that get cut off, or there's the excitement of like someone's evil desire being thwarted. And so it's people's desires. Like I feel like this is one of the little like fiction craft truism things, even, is like every character wants something, and it's that wanting that puts them in conflict with each other, and that makes the story turn. Like whatever kind of tradition you're working in, whether it's like the very Western like conflict kind of story, or just like a story of someone like walking from one place to another, like they want to get there, like that's why they're walking. So there's that aspect, but also, I mean, I'm probably thinking a little also in terms of like what women are allowed to desire, what people of color are allowed to desire, and how they're allowed to show that desire or go after that desire. I think that's subconsciously definitely part of what's going on as well. I don't know if I thought about it so directly, but
I look for stories with queer content, written by queer authors in a queer world. I look for that. And I think I remember Samuel R. Delaney in answering a question about whether his work was Afrofuturism. His answer was, I'm writing about a bunch of Black gay men living on the outskirts, loving each other, having sex with each other, and surviving. And he said, that's fantasy to me. That is Afrofuturism. And I thought that was really, really a profound response. And your characters are queer. Many of them are queer. And it's casual. It's what we in the reading world would call just casual queerness. It's not a thing. It's not controversial. Nobody bats an eye. And and there's a fantastical element to that, especially when you're dealing with communities of color and black people, right? Like we don't yet have that across the board. Of course, pockets of that exist. So when you were writing and thinking about, like, was it even a conscious thought that your characters would be queer, and how did you decide how you would present that queerness to the reader?
I guess at that point, like the point of writing the story, I just didn't feel like writing homophobia aspects of it, because at the very like basest level, it changes the plot, because we don't then have this relationship is problematic because of the colonizer and colonized aspect of it, but we also have to deal with the fact that they have to hide it because so-and-so can't know and so-and-so can't know. And so that I was like, oh gosh, I can't do that. That's too much. But also, like, I think at the time I just wanted to, let them just, if they can find happiness, have it. Go have fun. It's going to be hard enough to get to the happy part anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't probably write a non-queer norm story, because I mean, I'm not like it's still a lived reality for most queer people. Like, maybe not where you are right now, but if you walk and put yourself in a certain situation, the expectations will change.
Yeah.
And you might have to deal with that kind of thing. And I mean, going back to your previous question, it does create a sort of different sort of erotic nature to the relationships that I could write. I mean, like, there is a reason that we've got that lesbian joke stereotype of the period piece and the hand touch. Like there's a reason that exists, and there's a reason those movies still get made and make money, and because there's something about it that still, because we're still in those situations, there's still a part of us, at least, that, or a part of me at least, that's drawn to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll probably write some like little delicate hand touches in a future book, but yeah, not right now.
What was your favorite part? What was your favorite part of the book to write? Like the part that brought you the most joy, even if it was like a sick pleasure.
Um, my favorite scene to write, there were a couple. One of them is my favorite scene to write, and probably also just like my favorite scene in the book, and I can't talk about that, but it's
Okay.
like one of the last ones.
Okay.
And but one of my favorite ones to write was like, so the relationship between Terrain and Luca had a lot of um, iterations.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually I decided that I wanted Luca to not be just uniformly hated. She's certainly hated, and not without reason, absolutely. But I wanted there to be a bit more nuance to her character. And so eventually I put her and Terrain in a room and just sort of like let them joke around and be silly. And so there's a scene, like after the ball, when they're like just, chilling, having tea, telling each
Uh-huh.
other stories, shooting the shit. And that was just really fun, because I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you guys can be happy like one time. So,
Just once. Yeah, that was a lovely scene. I liked the iterations of their relationship too. I like that even though that was a central relationship and that was the relationship around which the rest of the story kind of revolved, there's so many other relationships that got developed as well. So I think for people who are interested in like platonic love or the love between comrades, filial love, and there was so much there to get into. So I definitely appreciate that. I want to talk about religion. How do you create a religion? How do you create gods? How do you create magic as a writer?
desperately, when I realized I need some rules
Mm-hmm.
to manage something. But like after I started actually doing like sit down, Sheree, figure this out, because we need to figure out international relations. And I realized that I couldn't write political plots unless I had the nations, and I couldn't write the nations unless I knew the resources, and I couldn't write the resources unless I knew what the magic did. And so it was this unfortunate rabbit hole that led all the way down. And something I did like that I came up with is like the idea of every god having a sort of duality in themselves or in their magic. And so I'm trying to decide like how much I can expand on. But like if we start with Kazal, we know that there's this healing magic that everyone's looking for. And so that god can like put things together or take things apart. And but specifically the human body. And so with that God's domain over like medicine and stuff, that kind of led me to what kind of technological advances would this nation have? Or all those who worship this God, what would they have? And so that kind of expanded into the kinds of things that they would export and share with people. And so that's how Balladeer got most of their medical technology and their surgical techniques and the idea of like washing your hands even. So all of that came back when they were like better allies. And similarly, like the idea of the aqueducts that bring water from the river in Khazal to the farm, like that came from Balladeer. I'm not going to tell you why, but close readers can probably figure it out, and you'll get a lot more in book 2. And then we have the we have the Targans and the many-legged who worship the same god but by different like avenues. And so they have different aspects of animal powers. And so the Targans they excel in animal husbandry. And so that's what they have to export, like farmed animals. And similarly in the many-legged plains lands, they travel like a moving herd, and that's their thing, but they all of their magic revolves around like animal powers. So like Niwai has their little like vulture and their lion and stuff like that. I was like, oh yes, we get animal pets. That's what I want. And if things go as planned, then we'll get some more of those in book 2 too. Excited.
I hope things go as planned. I was going to ask you a question at the end, but why we're here, so why not? How much more of this wonderful world are we getting, and when are we getting it?
That is an excellent question. We got 2 more books on the docks.
Congratulations, and also awesome. Thank you.
So The Unbroken was bought as a trilogy, and okay. I will finish it eventually, I guess. I finished a draft. It's with my editor right now, but I still can't leave well enough alone. So I'm tinkering with things, trying to figure out, because there were a lot of holes. Sorry, guys. Don't know exactly how everything fills out, because this is my first time also like trying to write 2 books in advance. So not only am I trying to get things right for book 2, but I'm trying to slot in all the pieces so that when I'm writing book 3, it all still makes sense. Especially because now I know I'm definitely writing book 3. I have time to kind of seed things in advance, like foreshadow a bit harder. Whereas like mostly nowadays when you sell a book to a publisher, you've got 1 book and you might have some ideas about what comes in the future, but you're always told to say it's a standalone with series potential. And so it's like, I mean, I could write some more books, but yeah, I've only written the 1, so I don't know what else. So that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now, but I'm excited. So I hope you guys like them.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I'm glad. I'm just looking, I have the cover like right here, so I'm just looking at it. I have some questions about craft and then also the audio. Like, I'm not sure how much control you had over Audible, because I hybrid read. So I read and annotated and stuff like that. I want to show you my annotations because it's a thing that I do. I use I'm a planner, so I use washi tape and also markers and stuff. So that's what my annotations end up looking like. Yeah, in the book. And I use this washi tape. You can't really see it very well, but it's actually desert.
Oh, that's so neat.
Yeah, so that's the washi tape that I chose for your book.
I might need a link for that one.
I will give it. Are you a planner? Do you use washi tape?
Yes and no. I just like that one in particular.
Yes.
I've been around it a lot, and I'm just like, I have a hard enough time planning itself, let alone decorating the planning, but I like the tape.
Yes, I will find a way to make the connection. So, okay, let's talk about the cover. How much I love the cover, and so when I now that I've, had an opportunity to get into the world, I have a better sense of what the cover means and where terrain is in all of this. But how much control did you have over the image, and what did you want the cover to convey?
Basically, that cover was the most perfect thing I could have ever imagined. I did have a fair amount of control, but I guess I don't technically know because I never had to exert it, because I found out first. My editor and I were like having a little jam session, and she was like, I kind of envision the cover of being like terrain, but in the kind of stereotypical fantasy guy poses that we see on covers, like maybe a throne, like some sort of power pose in front of a throne or something like that. And I was like, yeah, boom, done it. That's what I want. I want terrain in a power pose. That's it. And nothing could be better than that. But like a dude power pose, like taking that particular fantasy trope and flipping it to her. Like that was what the editor said. And I was like, yes, we're on the same page. And then I found out that Tommy Arnold was doing it. And I was like, well, really, this could not possibly get better. And then I got the sketch of her in this. It's like this, but sorry, I'm also looking at my cover. It's like this, but just, like sort of rough. The colors were blurred, but I could figure out like where she was supposed to be. Like the pillars were there, and I was like, all right, cool. So we got this sort of sandy thing. And also Tommy read the book. So that helped a lot because he understood what was going on. And with the art director, Laura Pinapinto's direction, I think it worked out beautifully. And we've talked briefly about what's coming up. And I know Tommy and Lauren have at least sort of started talking, because he talked to me on Twitter about it. And he was like, I'm really excited to get started on book 2. And I was like, oh my God. So I know that they're working on it soon. And so my editor and I, we talked a little bit about it. And she was like, okay, send me some references to use so that I can send them to Lauren and Tommy. And I was like, yes, I think it's going to work. I'm not going to say too much, but, just knowing that we have 2 primary point of view characters,
Yes, that's very exciting. That's very exciting. I want to just share my screen so that we can see the cover a little closer. I don't know if this is going to work, but can you see only the cover?
I see
like
I see it in the browser.
Okay. Well, that's as good as I can get at the moment. Yeah. So one thing that I love so many things about it. The first thing that I noticed, because of the human that I am, were those arms. So that's the first thing I was like, oh, okay. We're definitely reading this.
Yeah,
Who's that person?
So that was one of the cool things, actually. I had to send Tommy the the description of the character, or like how I envisioned her. So there was like the closed description, obviously, but one of the most important things to me was that I wanted terrain to be perceived as like a masculine of center queer woman. And so there was that aspect, but also I had the very important keynote that she had to be hot, but like she was hot to queer women, because I didn't want like a
Check.
like a Good. So yeah, he definitely, what's that meme going around? Like he understood the assignment. He understood the assignment big time. And yeah, so he delivered. Terrain's arms delivered. I could not be happier.
Yeah. Yeah. And like arms are important to queer women. So it's great. So I feel like, so when I first looked at the cover, I was just like, okay, so this person, because I wasn't sure if this would be a non-binary main character or anything like that, right? Is holding up these two pillars and is bridging these two pillars in between them. And it's actually only now, Sheree, that I realized that in the background, I don't know if you can see my cursor, is like war, and I didn't notice the dust until this very moment. Like there's so much in this, there's so much here, right? I love the use of color. I love the reds. I love the light. I love the facial expression. I love that you can't actually see Terrain's face unless you look for it, but that when you look for it, she's super hot. So it's like, you know what I mean? There's just like, so there's lots here. So thank you to you for the like character. And did you say the Tony was the artist?
Tommy Arnold.
Okay, Tommy Arnold. I'm not familiar. I'm still trying to get into learning about artists, because cover art is so important, and I don't think that it gets centered enough. So
do you know the Gideon covers?
So because I read Black SFF.
Oh yeah, okay.
Right?
Okay.
But I have seen the Gideon covers.
That's him as well.
Okay, cool.
Also he did the Kaya Shanti Wilson covers for
Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps and
Taste of Milk and Honey.
And yes, well, I would not have, I'm just gonna stop this share. I wouldn't have guessed that, but now looking at them, I love these covers. I love these covers too. So there's a darkness, there's a stormy texturedness to, these people could hang. They look like they could, they could be in similar world together. And I just love the cover, and I love the story, and it's cool that you mentioned that. I'm gonna look at the art all together now. Yeah, that's cool. So my other question for you is about the audiobook, and do you get to choose the narrator, or did you have any influence at all in that?
I did. I got to sort of set parameters, and then the audio folks went and like found actors for it, and then said, okay, here are a few that I liked. They've all done a clip for you. You can pick if you have a preference. And then I also send like a pronunciation guide, which was actually just me saying things. But one of the things that I did want was someone who spoke Arabic or understood it, and French as a bonus, just because there were enough names that I wanted them to be gotten right.
Yeah.
And also, if possible, I wanted to have someone of North African was like the first preference, but then we sort of widened things out from there. So
I love the narrator. I think that she was an excellent choice. I loved, and I feel like I feel this way. Part of the reasons why I hybrid read as much as I can is because my own sub vocalization is me, right? And so the words sound like they come out of my mouth, and unless I wrote the book, they didn't, right? So really, and because I assume that authors usually have a say in who gets to narrate, and that there's some measure of control, that there's I assume a certain degree of deliberateness about it. And the narrator was amazing. I love the way that she pronounced the names and the magic, and I loved the way sarcasm came through, especially when we have Terrain interacting with rebels. It was just how she was able to capture the warmth, the feelings of distrust, but also the vulnerability in some of the characters. It was so well done. And I just wanted to let you know that I really appreciated that. And I think it was important it was important for it to sound North African, or Middle Eastern. Like I wasn't really sure where we were going to sort of land in terms of the voice and accent, but it located the story for me in ways that the cover also did, and also your writing did as well. So that was really well done.
Oh, cool, thank you. I haven't listened to the entirety of it, only like snips of the like, okay, this is where we are. You satisfied with this? And I was like 100%. So I haven't listened to all of it, but now I'm excited to just kind of go back and just see where we got to. Awesome.
So the reveal, one of the reveals was super well done. There's a scene involving music and dancing. I don't know if you've heard that one yet. Really amazing. And then there's a character we meet in the last third of the book, who's different. And the way that character was voiced.
Oh man, I can't wait. Oh, I'm so excited.
Like it was just, I was like, okay. Right? So yes. So this is cool. It's cool that you're going to get to like enjoy your own writing, right? From a bit of a distance, right? Through someone else's voice and so on. But it was, it was great. There are some characters that I really hate. And I think you need to have some characters that you hate, and the way that she just made them so easy to hate. So, yeah, that was really cool. So, as we sort of get to the end of our conversation, and usually when we get to the end, I want to stay longer and talk to you more about other things, and maybe there'll be another opportunity to do that. But I just want to kind of take us away from the story and take us toward talking about Sheree, right? Like, I read a lot of books, and after I finish reading, I often have all these questions about who wrote this and what their life is like. What do they like to eat? Who are their friends? Where do they live? What do they do? Right? Like just all these probably like inappropriate boundary crossing questions, none of which I'll ask on air, but questions just about like who you be, right? Who you be in the world. So tell me about your work in the science fiction and fantasy community, and I'm familiar with it. I learned about you through learning about FIA and knowing people in the FIA community, and I love FIA. I love the Black SFF community and the queer folk in the community, like with my whole heart. So so tell me a little bit about your work in community, your work with other writers, and where do you see yourself situated in that?
Man, it's like thinking about FIA. FIA actually published my first story ever, which, back when Justina was still there. And so that's kind of like my springboard into it. And then I sold a story to Podcastle shortly after. And at the same time I was reading Slush for Clark's World. So I guess to rewind a little, I studied writing in undergrad and I went to do an MFA in creative writing, but the opportunities were never really like as adjacent to speculative fiction as I wanted, because we could work on the school magazine and I was like, I don't really like this. And so unfortunately, it wasn't until I graduated already that I discovered I could be reading Slush for these genre magazines that I liked. And so I started doing that, and I got a better handle on, the writers who were writing, started reading more short fiction. I got on Twitter, and that was the beginning of the end.
Yes, yes.
And so like FIA, Clark's World, Podcastle, and then I published a story in Podcastle and was trying to, like, it was several months later, like by the end of the year, Kalita was stepping down from her editorial chair, and so she wanted to know if I wanted to come in, and that kind of got me even further into it, because then I actually was like, oh, now that I am in an editorial seat, I can't just look and be curious about the change is happening, like I actually have an active role. I am participating. So started paying a bit more attention to things like the skewing of table of contents lists in one direction or another, and trying to be a more active hand in that. But also, since we do podcasts, also paying attention to who we have read the stories, which is also why getting Rasha was so important to me. For The Unbroken. Like, it's something I've been paying a lot of attention to. And so part of my, and now I'm also an editor for the SIFWA blog, and so part of what I would like to be doing, what I'm trying to do in the genre community, is keep us moving forward. Like I mean, it seems kind of silly and cliche to say, but it's like I want there to continue to be more room for people like me. I mean, selfishly, but people like me, but just like general minority folk. And I think the next thing that I'm really excited about doing is dealing with neurodiversity in the genre. I know we've got some essays like that or dealing with that coming up in the SIFWA mag, because you know, the submissions policies, I don't know if it's not submissions policies so much, but the submissions like process, it can be very difficult for people of different like neurodivergent people, depending. And so, and I mean, even neurotypical people, like, it's not easy. And so just paying attention to seeing how we can make things better on a, like, literally, sometimes it's just a technical level. Like, does everything have to be in this specific strict format? Or can we be more open or less weird about when people send emails? Like, literally everything. And so that's part of it, honestly. And also, you know, like, I can't always be doing everything, because, you know, we all only have so many spoons, right? But just to, I don't know, lead by example of being a decent human for some of the younger writers who are coming up. And people talk about noticing the shift from when you go from like unpublished sort of nobody to like having everybody's eyes on you. Like, some people don't notice, and so they still mouth off like they're a nobody, but they're not anymore, and everybody can see them, and it makes people feel shitty. And so, like, I tried to be aware of that and just kind of be a decent human. And, you know, if I need to punch somebody, hopefully I'm punching the right person, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you. So I will thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you, and and thank you so much for writing. Thank you for The Unbroken. I'm looking forward to what's going to happen next, and also to you know, to getting to know you in the Black SFF community. I'm super excited about about FIACon 2021, and yeah, it last year was just amazing.
The most amazing thing ever.
Okay, can we just fan person about it? Because
yes, it was so good. It's like literally the best con I've ever been to. I've been in in-person cons. I haven't been to like in-person world cons or whatever, but like it can't beat it. It couldn't possibly, except for like the literal physical having coffee next to somebody. That's the only thing.
Yeah. It was so good. It was so good. And I just
come up with it. Oh, it's so fast. Sorry.
No, you're fine. And it was so good. And I just, like, I felt like it was like constant, like there was just a next level that it reached, and then a next level. So like I would go to one panel and just be like, wow, that was amazing. And I have all these notes and I want to meet all these people, and oh my gosh. And then another panel I was like, oh my God, that was amazing. And then another one and it was just like, it was exhausting because everything was awesome. right? Even like panels about stuff I didn't really care about or wasn't really interested in. I was just like, oh my gosh, I need to explore that. And everybody's smart, everybody's hot, everybody knows like some cool things. Like everybody's got just all of this energy and joy, and there was such a kindness to the space too. And cons, as you know, probably more than I do because I haven't been to a ton, but cons can get petty. And it was a family vibe. And I just walked away feeling like I've got 45 cousins right now. 45 people want me to just send these weird emails to you being like, hi, you're so smart. Your book, right? So yeah, it was wonderful, and I can't wait to see what happens this year. And once COVID-19 passes and we're in a sort of post whatever that means, COVID world, I hope that we'll be able to like do it in person. I can meet all y'all and
that'll be cool
in that way. But in the meantime, I feel like this virtual world is allowing us to have perhaps more intimate connections at a con, because you can't connect with every single person in person, and sometimes you don't want to. So right. So yeah, that's that'll be cool. But I just want to thank you so much for your time and participating in this. And if folks want to reach out to you, what are your boundaries? How do you like people to reach out to you? If you do, what's the best way to do so? And then we can close.
Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter, which is at C_L_CLARK. My last name is Clark with no E. So C_L_CLARK. I'm also on Instagram sporadically at CLClarkWrites. And I have a website, which is my contact form. So if you guys ever want to email me, my email is my website is clarkwrites.wordpress.com.
And if somebody is just starting off in writing and they want help, workshops that they can attend, and connections, or want to know what kind of magazines they should be submitting to and so on, is that something that people can reach out and ask you about? Are you okay with that?
Could, but I think if everyone did that, it would take up quite a lot of my time to answer. So I have actually in my newsletter, I've posted many different craft references that I use and that I love and recommend to anybody, everybody. And my newsletter you can get to through my website as well.
Okay.
And what else? I mean, you can always tweet at me. I can usually probably get off a quick tweet better than I can get off an email. Sorry, folks, if you email me, it might be a black hole of a little bit.
Yeah, and then that's why I talk about boundaries too, because while I know people watching these interviews will sometimes want to reach out, it's nice to give them a taste of what's okay, what's not okay. What I'm hearing is that you already have resources that are available. So I'll make sure to have a link to those in the description so people can click on that, and you can spend your time marshaling your amazing imagination to writing books. And then other people can just use the curated list to get along their way. So we're going to close now. Thank you so much. And
thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Hey everyone, I hope that you enjoyed my discussion with Sheree. I really did, and it was such a wonderful way to start off the series. My discussion with them was actually my first interview for the Written with Purpose series, and I can't really think of a better way for it to have started. So I think 3 things that I'm reflecting on after listening to that conversation again is, number 1, how important queer thirst trap covers are, because yes, we do buy books because the covers are gorgeous. And you know what? There aren't a lot of covers, at least that I know, that were illustrated by artists who were directed to ensure that the cover attracted the queer eye. And I really appreciated that, because there were things about that cover that I think I noticed because I am a Black queer woman, and I really appreciate the specific focus on that. The second reflection that I have is about violent women. And Sheree got me really thinking about the fact that, yeah, women, and in particular, Black women, queer women, are not really allowed by society to be angry in peace, to defend ourselves. We're often punished when we do that. And there are a lot of reasons for us to be angry. And it is okay to be angry sometimes. And sometimes we need to do it with a sword in our hand. And those are facts. And the third thing that I'm thinking about is desire, and how connected desire and war, desire and conquest, how important those are. And I think for me as a political being in the world, it's always important for me to think about what desires are prompting all of the oppressions that we face. Like, what desires are prompting anti-Black racism? What desires are prompting homophobia and transphobia? And what desires are prompting our hope and our work to undo all of these oppressions? There is a better, beautiful, more peaceful world out there, and desire helps us orient ourselves towards that place. So I have chosen one of the Harvest of Survival affirmation cards, and this one has a quote from Dr. Nnedi Okorafor from the book Binti. "We cried and sobbed and wept and bled tears, but when we were finished, all we could do was continue living." And the reflection question here is, where are you willing to go through it in order to get through it? Answer that question in the comments, and I will be there to chat with you. Remember, if you want to be entered into the draw to win a 2022 Melanin Eclectic Reading Planner, then what you need to do is like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this video, and then answer this reflection question in the comments. I'll see you there, and remember to always read with purpose. Bye.